This man stood 13 feet tall. Every morning, 4 handmaidens attended to him as he rose from sleep. Fresh flower petals carpeted his every step, and beautiful women bathed him in luxurious pools. He was the man of every woman's dreams and the hero to countless men, all because he was an ancient deity of Egypt, dating back thousands of years. Golden blood coursed through his veins, and he could transform into any fearsome beast at will. These gods ruled over the weak mortals of Earth with their divine powers and sacred weapons. Today was supposed to be the day he would become their new leader, but just as the king was about to place the crown upon his head, his uncle, the god of the desert, stormed in with an army of soldiers clad in crimson armor and launched a coup. Right before the eyes of the entire nation, Set murdered his own brother with his bare hands. He then issued a chilling ultimatum to every god and citizen present: bow to his rule or be cast into slavery. Horus, the sky god, watched his father die before his very eyes. There was no way he would let this stand. He seized his weapon and charged at his uncle, unaware that this was exactly what Set had planned all along. Horus, who had spent his days in idle comfort, was no match for the cunning and ruthless desert god. Set used his shield to reflect blinding light into Horus's eyes, throwing off his aim. Despite his extraordinary power, Horus couldn't overcome his battle-hardened uncle. Facing certain defeat, Horus transformed into his true divine form to fight back. Set followed suit, assuming his own godly shape. Their epic battle sent the crowd into a panic. They clashed from the heavens down to the earth, toppling massive buildings in their wake. At a critical moment, soldiers once again blinded Horus's vision. Set seized the opportunity and unleashed a relentless assault, eventually forcing Horus back into his human form. But Set wasn't finished. To crush any hope of revenge, he gouged out his nephew's eyes with his own hands. Those radiant orbs were the source of Horus's power. Without them, he would be reduced to nothing more than an ordinary man. Just as Set prepared to execute Horus on the spot, the goddess of love, Horus's fiancée, fell to her knees and begged for mercy. She offered her eternal freedom in exchange for sparing his life. And so Horus was banished to a remote desert, condemned to guard the old king's tomb. Meanwhile, Set claimed the throne he had so desperately coveted. But his vision for the kingdom was nothing like his predecessors. On his very first day as king, Set launched massive construction projects funded by crushing taxes. He ordered the slaughter of anyone loyal to the former regime and enslaved most of the population, forcing them to work day and night building a tower to glorify his achievements. Worse still, when mortals died, they were required to surrender all their worldly possessions to him. Those who had nothing couldn't even earn the chance to be reborn. Under this brutal tyranny lived a thief named Beck, who refused to accept his fate. His girlfriend told him that today was the king's victory parade, which meant Set would be hauling all his plundered treasures into the royal vault. An audacious plan began to form in Beck's mind, one that seemed almost impossible. That night, as the king's golden transport rolled through the streets, Beck slipped into one of the cargo containers in the back. He was dumped into the treasury along with hundreds of tons of gold, but he wasn't there for riches. His target was the eye of Horus, gleaming at the center of the vault. Beck was a seasoned thief, but he quickly realized this heist was far more dangerous than he'd imagined. When he casually kicked a gold bar forward, he discovered the floor was crawling with thousands of deadly scorpions. Still, this wouldn't stop him. With his girlfriend's help, he had already obtained the blueprints to the vault's elaborate trap system. He lit his torch, knowing that wherever a shadow fell, it would trigger the mechanisms. Holding the flame high above his head to minimize his shadow, Beck advanced one careful step at a time. He made it through the first obstacle, only to find the second one was completely different from what the blueprints showed, clearly designed to deceive would-be thieves. Before he could react, statues sprang to life and swung at him with deadly force. Thanks to his quick reflexes and agile body, he weaved through the gaps between the mechanisms and narrowly escaped. The eye of power lay just ahead, but the blueprints showed no solution for the third trap. With no other choice, Beck bet his life on one final gamble. The moment he stepped onto the trigger, the floor began to collapse beneath him. One wrong move and he would plummet into a bottomless abyss. Summoning every ounce of strength, he leaped forward just as the platform fell away and grabbed the eye of Horus. Facing the swarm of scorpions on his way out, Beck held the divine eye before him like a shield. The holy light radiating from it drove back the vile creatures. But Set had been more cunning than Beck anticipated. He had hidden the two eyes of Horus in separate locations. When Beck returned to meet his girlfriend outside the palace, he found that his plan had been discovered. In desperation, he raised the eye of power, and its brilliant light sent the surrounding soldiers stumbling to the ground. Beck grabbed his girlfriend and they fled by chariot. He thought their mission to save the fallen god was finally on track. Then, in an instant, an official's arrow pierced his girlfriend's heart. Beck held the love of his life as she died in his arms. Consumed by grief, he placed all his hope in Horus. Using the eye of power as a bargaining chip, he begged the god to bring his girlfriend back to life. But what Beck didn't know was that only a king had the authority to retrieve a soul from the underworld. And with only one eye, Horus possessed just half his former power. The only way to resurrect her was to help Horus kill Set and reclaim the throne. In his current state, Horus was no match for Set. The only thing he could do was use his divine status to summon Anubis, the guide of the dead, and ask him to lead his girlfriend's soul toward reincarnation. A wealthy man placed his life's fortune on the scales. The weight of gold, silver, and jewels outweighed the feather of truth, and with that, he was permitted to pass through the gates of reincarnation into paradise, his soul granted eternal life. The old woman who came next was not so fortunate. When the judge asked what she had to offer, she placed a single iron ring on the scales, the most precious thing she had ever owned. But the feather slowly sank. Her offering was lighter than the feather of truth. For the poor, death brought no passage to heaven. Instead, their souls were dragged into the depths of hell, condemned to suffer for eternity with no hope of rebirth. Zaya had been a slave in life, and she possessed nothing.
What do you offer? What do you offer?
Her lover sought the help of Horus and summoned Anubis, the god of death, hoping Anubis would serve as Zaya's ferryman and guide her safely through the underworld into the cycle of rebirth. But the judges of the underworld cared only for wealth. Zaya had no gold or treasures to offer them, and once a soul crossed through the gate of rebirth, there was no turning back. Bek's only remaining hope was Horus. He returned the stolen eye of power to the god, begging him to use his divine strength to retrieve his beloved from the realm of the dead. Horus pressed the eye back into its socket, restoring half of his power. But he told Bek that only a king had the authority to command the underworld to release a soul and bring someone back from death. The only way forward was to reclaim the other eye of power within 7 days, restore his full strength, and defeat the god of the desert before Zaya completed her final passage into the afterlife. Only then could Horus reclaim the throne of Egypt and, as king, demand her soul's return. This was the sole chance to save the woman he loved. Bek resolved to help Horus recover the other divine eye, and together they set off on their quest. Word soon reached Set that the eye of power had been stolen from his treasury. He immediately ordered his forces to hunt down the thief, but Set had no idea the eye was already in Horus's possession. The second eye remained under Set's personal guard, and only by defeating him could it be reclaimed. With just one eye, Horus stood no chance against Set in a direct confrontation. Their only option was to seek out Horus's grandfather, Ra, the sun god. To destroy the god of the desert, they needed the water of life from Ra's solar vessel, only that could extinguish the desert flame, the source of Set's power. So the two climbed to the peak of the highest sacred mountain in all of Egypt. At the summit stood a celestial gate leading into the cosmos. With only one eye, Horus couldn't transform on his own. He could only face the sun and plead with Ra to grant him one chance to restore his divine power. Meanwhile, Set was marshalling his armies, hunting down every god who dared oppose him, determined to wipe them out entirely. The few surviving deities had retreated behind the walls of the goddess of protection, Set's former wife and the leader of the rebellion. This drove Set into a frenzy. He mounted his flying war chariot and decided to take matters into his own hands. The chariot tore across the battlefield, cutting a path straight to his ex-wife's palace gates, her final line of defense. Set's methods were utterly merciless. He slaughtered them all without hesitation. His former wife had turned against him precisely because she could no longer stomach his cruelty. With defeat inevitable, the goddess of protection struck at Set's deepest wound. Long ago, to punish Set for his violent and unruly nature, Ra had stripped him of the ability to bear children.
That's why Ra was wise to ensure you would never have a child.
These words sent Set into a rage. He seized her and, with a single stroke of his blade, severed the golden wings from her back. Those wings would become a crucial artifact on his path toward becoming a demon. To keep his shameful secret of infertility from being exposed, the god of the desert seized his former wife by her wings. Before the violent Set, the guardian goddess was utterly defenseless. Without a shred of mercy, he severed her wings completely.
Why? No one will know until it's too late.
But this was only part of his sinister plan, to forge himself a suit of ultimate armor. He had already gouged out both eyes of Horus, the god of the sky, and ripped out the heart of his own brother, Osiris, the god of life. Set's ambitions extended far beyond ruling Egypt. He craved divine enhancements that would allow him to dominate the underworld as well. To stop Set, Horus, who had managed to recover one of his eyes, joined forces with a mortal companion and scaled Egypt's highest peak to pray to the sun god for aid. His prayers were answered. Empowered by Ra's divine blessing, Horus transformed once again into a golden warrior. With this temporary surge of godly power, he grabbed Bek and shot into the sky, following the sun's trajectory through the atmosphere and racing toward the cosmos. At last, they beheld a magnificent vessel suspended in the void of space, the solar bark, commanded by his grandfather Ra, who had stood guard here for millennia. Horus and Bek touched down on the deck, but night had not yet fallen, and the scorching heat was unbearable for any mortal. Bek had no choice but to huddle in Horus's shadow as they both knelt before the sun god. Ra, however, showed nothing but contempt. He berated Horus for daring to bring a mortal into his sacred domain. Just as Horus was about to explain himself, Ra silenced him and ordered him to stay put. There were far more pressing matters at hand. Ra swiftly donned his crown, shed his cloak, and began pounding his chest with tremendous force. With each thunderous blow, his body grew taller until he towered as a colossal giant, radiating blinding divine light. This, it turned out, was Ra's daily shift. Standing in the command chamber, he gripped the chains that bound the sun and steered its course across the heavens. At the same time, he wielded the sun's power to hold back the chaos serpent that threatened to invade the earth. Every day at this hour, the beast of chaos would emerge from the darkness, hungering to devour the world Ra had created. And every time, Ra would take up his spear and drive the monster back into the abyss.
Crawl back to shadow, you stinking worm! You shall never feast on my creation!
Though the Chaos Beast feared the Sun God's power, it never ceased its relentless pursuit of destruction. Ra teleported back to Horus's side and made it clear he had no energy to spare for mortal conflicts. The Chaos Beast grew stronger with each passing day, and he could not afford any distractions. So when Horus pleaded for help, Ra told him he would have to solve this on his own. Even after Horus recounted how Set had murdered his brother and seized the throne, and described in detail the atrocities Set had inflicted upon the people, Ra remained unmoved. He had long known of Set's deeds. In his eyes, whether mortal or divine, all must accept the capricious nature of fate and the natural order of change. He would not intervene. After all, Set was also his own flesh and blood, as precious to him as everything else he had created. Seeing there was no point in pressing further, Horus made one final request, some of the waters of life, which could extinguish the flames of the desert and weaken the very source of Set's power. Ra granted this much. But before Horus departed, the Sun God offered him a warning. If he truly wished to defeat Set, he must first shed his innate arrogance and temper his spirit to become genuinely powerful. For too long, Horus had wallowed in a life of ease and comfort, gradually straying from the righteous path he was meant to walk. He had forgotten that every god must endure a great trial in their lifetime. Only by passing through hardship and facing true tests could he reawaken the dormant power within. Why is it that no male creature can resist the goddess of love's enchantment?
Warm yourself. I command you.
Quickly.
With just a single word, she reduced the black serpent to a mindless state, causing it to burn itself alive. After Horus failed to get help from the Sun God, Set dispatched his bull-headed warriors to hunt them down. Although Horus now possessed only one eye and half his divine power, dealing with these lowly minions was still child's play. When the bull general returned to camp after his failed mission to report to Set, the news that Horus had not only obtained a divine eye but also vowed revenge sent Set into a violent rage. In one swift motion, he turned and cleaved the bull general's head clean off. Witnessing this, the twin snake sisters, one black, one white, stepped forward and volunteered for the mission, swearing to eliminate Horus for Set. Each sister commanded a massive serpent, and together their combat prowess was truly fearsome. Sensing the gravity of the situation, the goddess of love quietly slipped away to a remote area and cast a spell to locate Horus, hoping to warn him of the dangers ahead. Instead, she inadvertently exposed their whereabouts.
I was wondering where he was. Now I know.
Even though she had been pretending to remain loyal to Set, he had long seen through her charade. The goddess of love had never forgotten her former flame, Horus, and Set had finally grown tired of playing along. He moved to seize the bracelet of the dead from her, a VIP pass to the realm of kings. In that critical moment, the goddess of love didn't hesitate to remove her life-protecting bracelet and was immediately plunged into an endless dark abyss. Demons sensed she had lost her protection and swarmed to snatch the bracelet away. Summoning every last ounce of her strength, she managed to reclaim it and barely escaped, teleporting to Horus's vicinity. Upon returning to the mortal world, the goddess of love wasted no time. She knew Horus was about to face a deadly threat and had to reach him before the twin snake sisters struck. Unfortunately, she was one step too late. The sisters had already found him. When Horus saw the two massive serpents slithering toward him, he knew his divine power hadn't fully recovered and he stood no chance in a direct confrontation. Setting aside his usual pride, he fled alongside Beck. The snake sisters immediately commanded their serpents to launch a full-scale pursuit. Man and god sprinted desperately ahead while the black and white serpents barreled after them, smashing through everything in their path. Just as the black serpent opened its gaping maw, ready to strike, Horus grabbed Beck and made a run for it. But even so, the gap between them kept shrinking. They ducked behind a stone pillar just in time to dodge the white serpent's first wave of fire. Taking advantage of the serpent's massive size and slow turning speed, the quick-thinking duo slipped into a maze of stone columns and vanished from sight. The white serpent whipped around and unleashed another blast of deadly venom fire, only to find its targets had disappeared. As the snake sisters searched everywhere, Horus and Beck found themselves cornered. Thinking fast, Beck came up with a plan. He revealed himself as bait to draw the sisters' attention and hurled taunts at them, deliberately provoking an attack. His words sent the black snake sister into a fury, and she commanded her serpent to lunge at him. Seizing the moment, Horus activated his divine staff and thrust it at the black serpent's belly, but its scales were impenetrable, and the attack failed. In the serpent's violent thrashing, Horus was thrown hard to the ground. The black serpent opened its cavernous jaws and lunged at him. At the last possible second, Horus activated his staff again and jammed it between the serpent's jaws, temporarily immobilizing immobilizing it. The woman was forced to dismount and engage Horus directly, but he deftly dodged her every move and slipped away. She rushed back to remove the staff lodged in her serpent's mouth. Though they had dealt with the black serpent for now, the white one was still lurking, ready to strike. After a moment's thought, Horus realized both serpents shared the same weakness, their masters. He had Beck continue playing bait to lure the white serpent while he waited for his chance. The white serpent came roaring from the distance, its jaws wide open. Beck bolted without looking back, but this serpent was even more ferocious than the other, leaving a trail of flames in its wake. Beck sprinted into a ruined temple with everything he had, using the crumbling walls for cover. Following behind, Horus used a fallen pillar as a springboard and leaped onto the serpent's back, engaging its rider in fierce combat. Though the white serpent was formidable, its controller was no match for Horus. With a flurry of smooth combos, he pinned her to her seat, unable to move. Without a guiding hand, the serpent lost all sense of direction and charged straight toward a cliff with its rider still aboard. In the final second before the plunge, Horus's agile reflexes allowed him to land safely on solid ground. But just as he caught his breath, the battered temple, weakened by the white serpent's rampage, began to collapse rapidly. The two pushed themselves to the limit, bursting out of the danger zone at lightning speed. When they turned around, they found the goddess of love had caught up to them. She strode forward with commanding presence and stood before the black serpent. The woman atop it, having witnessed her sister's defeat, furiously ordered the serpent to breathe fire. But to everyone's surprise, the black serpent meekly approached the goddess of love instead, its earlier ferocity completely gone. It had transformed into an adorable, docile pet, allowing her to calmly remove the staff still stuck in its mouth. What kind of question could possibly stump the all-knowing god of wisdom?
I never was. Am always to be. No one ever saw me, nor ever will. And yet I am the confidence of all who live and breathe. What am I?
Without hesitation, he blurted out an answer, order. Horus immediately praised him for his brilliance, but the words had barely left his mouth when the Sphinx slowly rose to its full, massive height and swatted Horus away with a single blow. Clearly, the god of wisdom's answer was wrong. He tried again, this time guessing, truth.
You are. Purity.
But that too proved incorrect. Once more, Horus was sent flying several meters through the air. Horus was completely stunned. He never imagined the god of wisdom would fail twice in a row. Left with no other choice, he had to step up and shield his companion, taking the Sphinx's brutal punches head-on to buy the god of wisdom more time. But the Sphinx only grew more ferocious. Just as Horus was about to be overwhelmed, the god of wisdom suddenly shifted his approach and finally arrived at the correct answer at the last possible moment.
You are tomorrow!
Bother.
Seeing that the riddle had been solved, the Sphinx reluctantly sank back into the earth. With the heart of the desert now within reach, Horus quickly pulled out the water of life, ready to extinguish the desert fire once and for all. But before he could act, he found himself ensnared in a trap that Set had planted ahead of time. Set had been lying in ambush all along. He crept up behind the god of wisdom and struck without warning, ripping away the brain that held infinite wisdom. Set had claimed yet another powerful artifact. Once he collected all 7 relics of the ancient gods, he would become unstoppable. In this critical moment, Beck's quick reflexes kicked in. He snatched up the water of life and made as if to pour it onto the desert fire. But Set intervened at the last second, holding up a token belonging to Beck's girlfriend. He revealed a cruel truth. No god had the power to resurrect a human being. Not even the king himself could bring the dead back to life. Horus had been lying to Beck all along, using him for his own purposes. While Beck stood there torn by this revelation, Set seized the opportunity to grab the water of life and knocked Beck to the ground. Then, with everyone watching helplessly, he poured every last drop of the sacred water into the sand. Now nothing remained that could stand in his way. Set continued to twist the knife, sneering at Beck. If you don't believe me, go ahead and ask Horus yourself. See if he can really bring the dead back to life. With that parting shot and a look of utter contempt, he turned and walked away with the arrogance of a victor. He had grander plans to set in motion. At that moment, the pyramid began to shake violently. Set had already rigged it to self-destruct, intending to bury everything beneath the rubble. In the face of disaster, Horus summoned a surge of incredible strength, breaking free from his chains. He frantically hoisted a massive gear to use as a shield, protecting his companions from the falling debris. Against all odds, he led them to safety, escaping the collapsing pyramid just before it crumbled into ruins.